Well, welcome to Office Hours 12, I believe. Is that right? 12?
Yeah,
wow.
that's right.
So there are a number of things I wanted to bring up with you. With me is Philip Gant. Philip studies Korean and Chinese history, and he's been involved with the content and the assessments we do for ChinaX. So, Philip, welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
Now, we have certificates for Part 1 and Part 2. A couple thousand in both cases is wonderful. We're delighted. And some of you have asked if later on you can go back and pick up your certificates from Part 1 or Part 2 after they're over. And we're working on the technology for that with edX. And so we hope to have that resolved soon. But they have to build some technological fixes for it. Any news on new developments for ChinaX?
Yeah, we have some great news. We're going to be joined in ChinaX by Professor Mark Elliott, who will teach a module on the Qing.
The Qing being the dynasty from 1644 to 1911?
Yes, exactly.
And Manchus, foreign invaders, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And this will bring us to a total of 10
10 parts. So he's going to do more than one lecture. He's going to do a series of things.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great.
Professor Bull, there have been some questions about Chinese people's names.
Okay.
Perhaps you could clear that up
Sure.
for us.
So the rule we have is that in China, traditionally, the surname comes before the personal name. And so we follow that in this course. When we're talking about people in history, we always put the surname first. When we have one of our colleagues here who has a Chinese name, we try to follow the Chinese order if they have a Chinese name. So Yuwen, for example, her surname is Yu and her personal name is Wen. But sometimes she'll say, "Hi, I'm Wen," right? So if you're confused by that, that's our general rule. Now, I noticed that some of our students are actually, most of our students already have BAs, and that some of them, in fact, are educators themselves.
Yes, that seems to be the case. We have many educators among our students, so welcome and thank you for joining.
Right. And we have a survey that's been done.
Yes. So the results of our survey at the end of Part 2 were quite positive. There's a tremendous amount of satisfaction, about 75% of you very satisfied, and another 24% satisfied. In addition, most of you, and actually the overwhelming percentage of you, 96% and above, believe that the course was at least about the same or better than before. So
great.
Thank you so
Good.
much.
And thank you for all your work and help, and for Liu Junjie and others as well. Now, I did want to bring up one thing with you which actually is giving me a bit of concern. When we began this course, the idea behind it was that we'd sort of make it, put it on the web, and leave it all up to you. And that sort of, we would have no relationship, everything would just be automatic and go on. It's clear from the amount of work you're putting in that you really want to have greater interaction, not only with each other, but also with the teaching staff. And so we've tried to do that. So we're doing office hours every week. We have people who are reading through everything in the forum, reading all your emails and asking me to respond. We're going through and trying to talk about the things you say in the discussion forum. But one consequence of that is that Professor Kirby and I have had to have used up all of Harvard's allotment for our course, and we've started to have to spend our own research money for this. We want to stay engaged, but I think that in a couple weeks we're going to actually have to bring in an invitation to donate something to ChinaX. And we'll talk more about it then, but that's the reason why, is because basically we've started to spend a lot more time and a lot more personnel time trying to make sure that we stay engaged with you. And so we're going to need to finance the course more. So, but we'll come back to that. But we hope you'll be understanding, but also generous. Thanks. Okay, so Philip, we have some issues about how the forum is being divided up.
Yes, just a couple notices,
Okay.
Professor, on new ways we're going to divide the forum from this week on. There'll be two choices, a fixed group and a rotating group. So those of you who are interested in staying in a fixed group with the same group of people can choose to do that and stay with the same group of people for 3 weeks. Rotating group will obviously rotate you week to week.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much.
Good.
And perhaps you could remind us about Cosmotang in the module.
Okay,
Give
so
us a brief
yeah, so this module was called Cosmopolitan Tang, and the basic idea behind it was that Tang is able to be cosmopolitan in the sense of being able to take things in from the world, but also offer models to the world. It was able to do that because it, in fact, had created a certain amount of stability, gained control over the great clans, gained control over its borders, built up a solid and reliable tax system, good infrastructure, and so on. An imperial family that was able to be the patron for many schools of thought, that it was able to be cosmopolitan in part because it had stability, peace, prosperity, and thus became a center for the world. It was the greatest city, Chang'an, the capital of, Chang'an as capital of Tang was the greatest city in the world at that time. Greatest city in the world. But we have some discussion questions. And we had two, right, this time?
We had two this time. Perhaps we could start with the first one, which was about great clans, because that was a central feature of the module. And the question was about there being any great clans in your home nation, and if so, what their relationship to the state is.
This was an extraordinary set of answers. I really enjoyed reading them. J.M. Worsley from Australia pointed out that there were well-known clans, such as the Murdochs and the Packers in Australia, that had great influence through their control of the media, for example. In the United States, Emmeline Boyer said, we have had, back in the 18th century, the Addams family from here in Boston, the Roosevelts in modern 20th century, the Kennedys, the Clintons and Bushes in the 20th, 21st century.
Right.
That J6 talked about the USA, the great industrialists, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, Fords, Mellons, and the philanthropy that resulted from that. But some people had questioned this, didn't they? I mean, I was thinking of Jigme.
Right, who provided a pretty good counterpoint in terms of a clan in a traditional sense being a collection of families who share more than just their surname, but rather political allegiance to one leader. And in the U.S., he gave the example of the Bush family, in which case there are many different people with the surname Bush, but not all of them aligned to the same Bush leader.
So I think there's something to that I'm not sure that there has to be an allegiance to a family leader, as much as the people say that we in our family are all somehow connected. I'll give you an example. In China, the surname Wang is very common, right? But there is a great clan in China called the Taishun Wangs, the Wangs from Taishun. And so people who say they're Taishun Wangs are all saying that we are connected together in a single clan.
Ragmo had a really interesting point about the role of elections and the limitations on family privilege. So in the United States, there not being the ability to put a son or daughter into office on the basis of heredity.
Good.
And Monty Burns had another interesting counterpoint about, in the case of Germany, sort of a great clan in China being based on family, propagating through conglomerate relationships, but in the West that not being the case anymore.
Anymore, at least, right? And
yes.
He talked about some of the families behind the great German automakers, for example.
I thought that Murray Rosenbaum gave a really fantastic third type of answer, which was to summarize, an attempt to synthesize and summarize the definitions or the characteristics of what a great clan would be. He mentioned things like traditional societies, tribal, interconnected through bloodlines and marriage, resistant to change and outside influence, hierarchical, and that was a theme, the attempt to give us criteria.
Roger James does that too, right? And I was very impressed by Roger James's account because he really goes in and sort of defines the various parts, the various aspects of meaning. And so make sure when you go to the website that you take a look at these comments and this definition. We'll put this up separately, of course. I think that the Tang great clans, the great clans of medieval China, are in fact a little bit unique, even in Chinese history, because these are families with a pedigree of service at court, at state service, being officials. And what's interesting is that they see themselves as lasting longer than any dynasty, that they're the source of cultural continuity, but that by virtue of their pedigree, by virtue of their family background, government somehow belongs to them. What's interesting is that when the Tang dynasty ends, the great clans end too, and never return again. But I'm not going to tell you why yet. But I will,
Lord.
because I think this is really the result of some very interesting research that's been done recently that we can explain now how it is that the great clans simply disappeared.
And
So, Philip, I have a question for you.
Yes.
There was a short response question. How did the Tang secure the trade route, the Silk Road?
yes, which is a fantastic question, a very important one. And my answer is just focusing on the early part of the 7th century, the Tang's early rulers being able to take advantage of divisions in Central Asian peoples and use them to their advantage and benefit.
Okay.
What do you think, Professor?
Well, I mean, I think that what I would say goes along with that. I think that Tang secured the Silk Road with military force, right?
Okay.
That they secured it with military force. They set up these various protectorates out in the West. But that if the Silk Road hadn't been making money for people, they couldn't have maintained that,
I see.
right? Because all these people have to be profiting from it to keep it running. It's not simply a matter of having military force. We had a second question, right?
Yes, another discussion question about it involved our three-dimensional images of the Tang figurines, which we were really excited to bring to you. And we asked you to focus on any aspect of it that fascinated you and try to explain the figures in terms of that aspect, be it fashion, production, action. And we had some common themes, didn't we, Professor?
Well, we sure did. First, a lot of attention to the social status of females. An appreciation for the fact that plump women seem to be very popular.
They do.
That there are a lot of foreigners, surprising number of foreigners that appear in these figurines. The horse is very important. That there's technical advances in production of these figurines. That there's multiculturalism, diversity, openness. That we see evidence of a prosperous cosmopolitan society. So, tell us, we have a number of people. Lillian edX.
So Lillian focused on beauty standards and the appreciation of plump ladies.
This Cyberflow talked about women on the horse, not riding side saddle, but fully astride, suggesting a degree of equality, but also that, given the clothes, affluence.
Right, and speaking of horses, Mir Chan focused on the role of horses in Tang and talked about their importation from the north and the west, and us being able to see this in the figurines, which was fascinating.
And the crucial role the horse plays, of course, in infrastructure to move things quickly, to move information quickly.
Absolutely.
Daniel H. Stein talks about the cosmopolitan nature of Tang, and here he focuses on the attention of foreigners and their features. Daniel, there's one point that I think I disagree with. I don't think that it's that they're marveling at foreign facial features because of the relative uniform features of their own population. I think actually that within China, people are quite amazed by the diversity of features in the Chinese population. And there's a whole bunch of art that actually shows that tries to, or books on physiognomy, sort of telling the fortune of somebody from their face that stress the difference in faces. Well, we have Gillian B.
Who brought up a really fascinating point about the Chinese under Tang importing new styles, fashions, products from Central Asia, but also exporting the things that they changed across East Asia. And we saw this in, for instance, her mention of the court lady wearing a kimono-type silk robe in Japan.
Right. And I would add to that, well, you know this from Korean history, that Korean sort of so-called Korean national dress for women is very much influenced by Tang court dress as well, or at least Tang clothing.
Tang did have a big influence.
Yeah. And finally, Evelyn Levin gave a very, very valuable discussion of ceramic production and the technology of ceramic production. She knows far more about it than we do, although I have to admit my wife is a potter, and so I'm going to bring this home and show it to her. She talks about kiln construction. She talks about the different kinds of clay, the colored clay that are used and why that matters, about low and high fired pottery, the use of what's called sansai, the 3 color glazes, double firing in some cases, to bisque and then to put on the glaze. And she says at one point, the more stable polychrome color was produced by using different agents such as copper, iron, and cobalt, a highly toxic oxide. It could perhaps stand as a metaphor for the whole period, colorful, stable, and pleasing to the eye. I think it was rather nice.
a
It was
wonderful
colorful,
response.
stable, and pleasing to the eye. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.